We simply have got to wake up. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
I rise to address the nomination of Cornelia Pillard for the D.C. Circuit. This nomination is a good example of the government overreach that has led to the Obamacare debacle. The good senator from Rhode Island was talking about how much we spend on health care in this country. The very unfortunate fact is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act will not address that cost. Let's face it, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is about as Orwellian a name as you could possibly come up with for a piece of legislation. We are watching millions of Americans lose their health care coverage. Those patients are not being protected by the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. We certainly are not watching the cost of health care decline. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act did not bend the cost curve down. It has dramatically increased or bent the cost curve up. And of course, anybody who even has the slightest knowledge of basic economics would realize that if you mandate expensive coverages on any insurance policy, the price is not going to go down, the price is going to go up. And we are witnessing that. We're certainly witnessing that in my home state of Wisconsin, where a young man age 27, on average, is seeing his premium increase by 124%, going from a little over $1,100 per year to closer to $2,500 per year. A young woman of that same age, 27, is seeing her premium increase by 78%, going from about $1,400 per year to about $2,500 per year. That's not bending the cost curve down. And that's not even talking about the added or the increased cost of their deductibles, the increases in their maximum out-of-pocket amounts that they're going to be spending every year. So again, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act does nothing that it promises. It is a disaster for our health care system. It is a disaster for our federal budget. It is a disaster for people and their health and their lives. Now, I'm down here on the floor of the Senate tonight, normally not down here at this time. Normally I'd be sitting at home and doing a little bit of homework. And so I guess what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes doing what I'd be doing at home, reading letters from constituents from Wisconsin. Now, when I introduced my piece of legislation trying to protect as many Americans as possible from the damage of the health care law, trying to honor the promise that President Obama and members of this chamber made repeatedly to the American public, that if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. I told a story about a couple in Wisconsin that had contacted our office. Initially, this couple wanted to be identified. They wanted their story told. By the time I'd gotten a hold of them on the phone to make sure that they were actually trying, getting some help in securing some health care, the husband had had second thoughts. He watched his government. He watched the Internal Revenue Service being used as a political weapon. And so he feared for his privacy. He feared for his economic security. And so he asked me, please don't use my name. Tell my story, but just don't use my name. That's a pretty sad fact. It's something we need to ponder. It's something we need to address. But that couple, their story was pretty simple and pretty sad. His wife was suffering from stage 4 lung cancer. He was recovering from prostate cancer. They were participating in the high-risk pool in the state of Wisconsin, a risk-sharing pool that worked. It was expensive for them, but it was something that they could afford. I know it worked because in my 31 years of business, as I provided health care for the people who worked with me, every now and again, unfortunately, one of the people who worked for me would have a serious health condition. When we would go to renew our policy, frequently those individuals, if the condition was bad enough, would be lasered out. They would lose coverage under our plan, but that was okay, because the state of Wisconsin very responsibly made a provision for those individuals, the high-risk sharing pool. And so what would end up happening is, because they were denied coverage, they automatically qualified for the high-risk pool. I, of course, would pay for that coverage in the same way that we would pay for coverage through our own health plan. What I found over the years, because this happened a number of times, is the coverage was very comparable. We had a pretty good, it wasn't a Cadillac plan, but solid insurance coverage. So similar coverage at a very comparable price. It was a plan that worked. It was a plan that covered those individuals with high risks. It was a plan that covered 22,000 Wisconsinites until this body, this Congress, passed the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which I described earlier, does neither of those two things. And so as a result of the passage of that bill, those high-risk pools are now obsolete. And so this couple got the letter saying they would lose coverage as of January 1st. Now put yourself in the position of people suffering from cancer or recovering from it. You have a lot of worries in life. You did not need the additional worry of losing your health care plan, but that's what this couple faced. As millions of Americans are facing the exact same worry, the exact same harm, the exact same damage. It's unconscionable. They, of course, went on to healthcare.gov almost 40 times when I talked to them. They were never able to successfully log on to it at that point in time. So we helped this couple get in touch with the insurance carriers that would be operating within the exchange, and they started getting quotes. They quickly learned that their premiums were going to double. Their out-of-pocket maximums were also going to be coming close to doubling as well. So the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act did not protect these two individuals, and it certainly did not offer them affordable care. Now, as I went through letters from our constituents, we did make a few phone calls knowing I was going to come down here, and just asked if anybody would want to be identified. A few brave souls agreed to be identified, and I'll read their names as I read their letters. The first Wisconsinite, Michael Wagner, writes, I am self-employed and have a family of 4. The President said we could keep our plan if we liked it, and our doctors. Not true. We are being pushed off our plan for the exchange. He said the average family of 4 would save an average of $2,500. Not true. I think he just makes numbers up. My equivalent policy on the exchange will cost $7,500 more per year. That is almost a 100% increase. He said we could keep our doctors. Not true. Our current company and PPO network is not offered on the exchange. The list goes on and on. The bottom line is that this needs to be stopped. If it isn't, the American people will stand up, and the landscape of senators will be unrecognizable after the next midterm election. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have the gall to stand up for your constituents. Well, Mr. Wagner, I definitely have the gall to stand up for my constituents. The reason I ran for the United States Senate wasn't because I wanted to be a United States Senator. The primary reason I ran for the United States Senate was to be the vote to repeal this monstrosity. To be the vote to protect Americans from the damage that I full well knew this law would inflict on millions of our fellow citizens. The next constituent that wrote to me, Darren Schauf, he wrote, we are a small manufacturer in Sparta, Wisconsin. This has been in operation since the mid-1960s. We currently employ 24 people and are a family-owned business, fabricating large fiberglass statues and water slides that are shipped all over the U.S. and Canada. We've been providing our employees health insurance for 15 years, paying for 100% of the premium. Pretty responsible employer. Those are the types of business people I know. Those are the type of business people that are very concerned about the people that work with them. Those are the type of people, business people, this president demonizes in his class warfare. Let me go on. We have experienced the increases in health insurance costs over the years and weathered them fine. I received our renewal this week for next year, and because of the Affordable Care Act, our premium went from $3,887.77 per month to $7,103 per month. How does this happen? What definition of affordable is being used to describe this effect? We will not be able to pay 100% of our employers' premium at this rate. How can we get a plan that is at least close to the cost that we were paying last year? Well, Mr. Schauf, I know how you can get a plan close to what you're buying last year. If this body would take up my bill, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your Plan Act. That's a true grandfather clause that actually would honor that promise for millions of Americans. We can't save the policies that have already been lost. We can't repair all the damage already done by this health care law. But we can still help millions of Americans if we act, if we are responsible, if we care. The next two constituents who write me are Brad and Dawn Nielsen. They write, my wife and I just received a notice that our monthly health care insurance cost will increase by 184%, increased by $1,330 per month. Starting in January 2015, and you need to understand how cheated we feel with this in what you have done. Now, I'm assuming he is referring to President Obama and Democrat senators and Democrat members of the House that voted for this monstrosity. Again, I ran to be the vote to repeal this law. We are both retired and have been paying our health care insurance for the past 3 years. We have what would be considered a good policy that falls in line with what would be considered a gold package as it relates to the ACA guidelines. We will be able to keep this policy with our insurance carrier through 2014 with a 7.5% increase in the monthly premium that is to cover the new affordable, and he puts in quotes, the Affordable Care Act cost. Although we were not happy about the increase, we were told by our carrier that the monthly premiums will increase to $2,054.61 per month starting January 2015. This is not right, and you as our representative need to understand what you have allowed to happen to us as well as others. Again, Mr. and Mrs. Nielsen, I wish we would have prevented this. I wish the members of this body would hear your plea and do something to protect you, as the bill claims to do, to repair the damage. We've worked hard, made sacrifices to be able to retire, saved through our company's retirement plan, invested when we could, and even put both of our kids through college. Now to be forced to pay an outrageous amount for something we have had for the last 3 years isn't right. This increase is a game changer for us and will dramatically affect our standard of living moving forward. It is important that you understand what is happening and the need to change this unfair law. I hope the President, I hope members of Congress are listening. The next constituent, Jeff Kubinski, writes, I'm sending you this email about the 2014 Affordable Care Act. I just received my letter from Humana stating my insurance is going to increase nearly 300%, from $550 per month to $1,559 per month. I cannot afford this. How is this affordable care? I have carried insurance all of my life, being self-employed. What is this plan trying to put the self-employed out of business? I want to keep my plan the way it is. Why are we being forced to change a plan that has benefits, or change to a plan that has benefits we don't need? Please help us citizens that have been carrying health care. Please make government for the people, by the people again. Let me just quick answer that question. Why is this individual being forced to change to a plan that has benefits that he doesn't need? Well, I guess it's because there were people here in Washington, in this alternate universe, that believe they're so smart, they're so clever, they know what is best for every American. They're so compassionate. They're just trying to help. They're not helping much. This law is not helping much. It is doing real harm. President Obama, Democrat members of the Senate and of the House, please listen to these constituent letters. Have a change of heart. Work with us to limit the damage before it gets greater. Those are the individuals who we contact that were willing to be identified. The rest of the individuals were either not contacted in time or decided, like the couple, that they had seen their government be used as a weapon against other citizens and decided to remain anonymous. So the next Wisconsinite writes, I am writing you to inform you that as of January 1st, 2014, my family of 6 and I will no longer have health care. This will be the first time in my life or the life of my children that we will be in this position. The reason for this is the Affordable Health Care Act. Laughable name. On that day, my premiums through work will go from $250 per month to well over $1,000 per month. In looking through the marketplace, my family's premium would also be well in excess of $1,000 per month. We are a typical middle-class family, and my wife and I both work full-time. Our combined income is in the $75,000 range. We are homeowners with a mortgage. We drive 8- to 9-year-old cars. Our children go to public schools. We do not live an extravagant lifestyle. I've been struggling to figure out what to cut to be able to afford this new health care system the government has stuck us in. No matter what we cut, it will not add up to $1,000. The other option is to put our house on the market and try to find something else outside of Madison. That is not what we want to do. Our kids are in high school. One with special needs. And we feel that would be unfair to them. So do I. Mr. Johnson, please explain to me how on earth this is affordable and fair. I can't. It's not affordable. It's not fair. It's utterly unfair. And it is utterly unnecessary. But it's a fact. It's one I hope everyone who supported this bill can live with. I hope it is a fact that everyone who voted and supported for this bill thinks about and is held fully accountable for. I find this Affordable Care Act to be divisive, unfair, and an unjust tax on the middle class. I will not vote for anyone that supported this act or continues to support this act, given the effect that it is having on my family. Sir, I am begging for your help. Please find a way to help my family and the rest of the Americans like us. Did you hear that? An American citizen begging for help from the harm that the Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act inflicted on his family, and he is begging this Congress, this chamber, this president for help. Please hear him. Another constituent writes, I'm feeling very upset and stressed over the new health care laws. I feel they're unfair and hurting working families. Our household income has shrunk, and our health care cost is going up over $300 a month. According to healthcare.gov, if insurance costs more than 9.5% of gross income, it is considered to be unaffordable. When a single person applies, only his or her income is taken into consideration. When a family applies, total household income is used to figure out affordability of single-only coverage. Single-only coverage for myself is about 8% of our family income. Single-only coverage for my husband is about the same. That means 16% of our income would be used for insurance through employers just for us. 16% of our income would be gone, and our 4 children would be uninsured. Family coverage costs 12% of our family income, still higher than 9.5%. Where is our tax credit? We don't qualify for tax credits because we have affordable insurance through our employers. If total household income is used, why isn't family coverage affordability taken into consideration? Last year, my family made about $55,000, 174% of the poverty level. Next year, we will make less due to reduced hours. Money is already tight. This new law will make things very uncomfortable for my family. I'm turning to my representative for help. Please help families in my same situation to the best of your ability. We need your help. This law is hurting us. Be our voice. Be our voice. Another Wisconsinite writes, I just called Physicians Plus to find out about the status of our health insurance policy. Our policy will not be renewed due to the Affordable Care Act. I guess this constituent decided to drop the patient protection because he obviously wasn't feeling particularly protected. My husband and I are freelancers in the video production field. My husband works so hard to support and take care of me and our 2 children. We are not rich, not by any means, just taking care of business. We have paid 100% of our premiums for 15 years. We have bought coverage that makes sense for our family at different times. Currently, we pay $513.60 per month with a $3,000 deductible. When I called Physicians Plus yesterday, the person said that my plan cannot be renewed. He said the new premium for a comparable plan will be $1,743. Again, that compares to $513. Now it will be $1,743. We cannot afford this in any way. I guess we are the collateral damage. I have tried to get on the Affordable Care Act to find our options. I refuse to give them personal information, so I can only go by the Kaiser Foundation estimate. There's only one plan that will keep our pediatrician, and it looks like we'll be looking at a $12,000 deductible with close to a $1,000 per month premium. We are on the high end, so get a very minimal subsidy. We do not want to get any help from the government. We want to be independent. But the government is forcing their hand on us. Again, we live in the land of the free, the home of the brave. And yet, these brave Wisconsinites are being forced. They're being coerced. This is the antithesis of freedom and choice. Please understand, we want people to have health care, but why are they destroying us in the process? I'm in the process of scrambling to find a job that provides insurance. I was offered an educational assistant job that has been changed to 29 hours, no health insurance. Gee, I wonder what caused that change in employment. Most opportunities I am finding have either recently dropped insurance coverage as a benefit. We are scared about the future. That's what the Affordable Care Act has done. That is what the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act has done to Americans, to Wisconsinites. It has made them fearful. They are afraid. They are scared for their futures. Good job, Congress. Good job, President Obama. My, aren't we a compassionate lot here? Didn't we do a fine job? Aren't we smart? The next Wisconsinite writes, I'm extremely unhappy with the so-called Affordable Care Act. Unfortunately, for my middle-class family, the new law is creating an unaffordable health insurance. I'm a 35-year-old independent project management consultant, and my wife and I have 2 children. We currently purchase health insurance on the individual market and are very happy with our coverage. We currently pay $352 per month to cover our family of 4. The plan offers a copay of $35 when going to the doctor and has a $7,500 deductible for our family. I've begun researching what our health insurance premiums will cost going forward under Obamacare, and I'm outraged with what I've found. The cheapest policy I can find is $761.70, and let me refer back to the fact that they're paying $352, so that's more than a 100% increase. So $761.70 per month for a bronze plan with a $12,600 deductible. Again, that compares to the $7,500 deductible under the plan that they are, quote, happy with. This is 116% more than what we currently pay with a higher deductible. If I look at a comparable plan to what we have now, The new cost will be around $900 per month, which is a 156% increase. Also, our income is slightly above the threshold to get any subsidies. New regulations in Obamacare will not benefit our family, but they will more than double our cost. We need to repeal this terrible law and replace it with simple, market-based incentives. Health insurance should be more like car insurance. You don't submit a claim to get your oil changed in your car. Same goes for health care. We should pay out of pocket for routine health care using a transparent price structure that allows consumers to shop for the care they want. Then have a cheap insurance policy for major illness coverage. Republicans need to communicate this alternative and make it simple for people to understand. I could not agree with this individual more. I realize repeal and replace is not possible until after the 2016 elections. But I appreciate and support wholeheartedly your new, if you like your health plan, you can keep it act. For the millions of people out there like me, we should be able to keep our current plan indefinitely. Hold the President to his promise and pass this law to grandfather in all existing policies. Let me just stop a minute and talk a little bit about the bill that I did introduce. If you like your health plan, you can keep it act. It's a pretty simple act. I encourage my colleagues to co-sponsor it and pass it as soon as possible. I wrote it a certain way. I wrote it using the exact same grandfather language that was in Obamacare. The problem with the grandfather language within the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is that, yeah, it grandfathered plans as long as you totally changed them. We took the grandfather language and we just pulled out you just have to totally change your plan. We made it a true grandfather provision. The same language. The true intent. The honest intent. So I urge my Democrat colleagues to support that bill. Again, let me emphasize, we cannot salvage unfortunately, at this late hour, most of these plans that have already been lost. To the individuals I'm reading from their emails tonight. But there are millions of Americans who will lose their coverage in the future. Let me tell you how it's going to happen. I bought health care for the people that work with me for 31 years in my business. I always was going to do that. There was no way I was ever going to subject the people who work with me to the financial ruin of not having a health care plan. That being said, like the previous writer was saying, I didn't pay for their auto insurance. I didn't pay for their homeowner and property insurance. I always kind of wondered, well, why am I having to make these very personal decisions for the people who work with me? Why am I having to decide on the levels of deductible? Why am I having to decide, is it a PPO or an HMO? Well, I know the reason why. It was government interference in the marketplace back in the 40s, wage price controls. The unions very naturally said, well, you can't raise our wages, give us some other benefit. Tax-free. That began the destruction of our health care system in terms of patient involvement, in terms of a competitive marketplace. Back then, 68 cents of every health care dollar was actually paid by the patient. There was free market competition to ensure cost restraint, ensure high quality and high levels of customer service. That's what a free market does. Today, only 12 cents of every dollar is paid directly by the patient. But getting back to the millions that are going to be losing their employer-sponsored care. Most employers care deeply about the people that work with them. They also would not expose the people that work with them to financial risk. But under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, The decision is totally different now. Now an employer is going to be facing double-digit premium increases when these plans that they were able to quick renew before January 1st come due in 2014. If the exchanges, as they should have been from day one, start operating properly, employers are going to be faced with the decision, should I pay $15,000 per family for family coverage? By the way, that's up $2,500 per year, not down $2,500 per year, as President Obama promised us. Do I pay $15,000 per family coverage and try and comply with 20,000 plus pages of law and rules and regulation, or do I pay the $2,000 or $3,000 fine and I'm not putting my employees at financial risk? I'm potentially making them eligible for subsidies in the exchange. That's the decision employers are going to be facing. And here's the kicker. Even those that are saying, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep providing that coverage. Just wait till the first competitor drops coverage, pays the $2,000 fine rather than $15,000 fine. Marketplace competition is brutal. It's not fun. It's why businesses that succeed should be celebrated, not demonized. But that's the decision to be made by millions of employers, and as a result, tens of millions of additional Americans will lose their health care coverage that they get through their employers using pre-tax dollars and get forced into the exchanges. Maybe some will get subsidies paid for by the American taxpayer, actually paid for a debt burden placed on the backs of our children and grandchildren because we can't afford the Affordable Care Act. That's what's really going to happen. That's what this chamber, this Congress, this president needs to consider. That's why I'm asking my colleagues in the Senate to join with me to pass the If You Like Your Health Plan, You Can Keep It Act, so we can protect millions of Americans, so we can honor that promise that was made repeatedly by this president and members of this chamber that voted for and supported this bill. Accept responsibility. Be held accountable. Act responsibly. Join me in that effort to protect Americans. Another Wisconsinite writes, please allow me to introduce myself and my family. We are an average middle-class Wisconsin family that is having a really bad year. My husband was diagnosed with cancer in May. I lost my job and our family health insurance in June. Because of pre-existing condition, our only insurance option was the high insurance risk sharing pool. Again, that's the plan in Wisconsin that I certainly found worked for real Americans. It worked. And it will now be obsolete because of the health care law. For our family of three, myself, husband, and college student daughter, our monthly premiums are $783 per month, with a $7,500 individual deductible. With a high insurance risk sharing pool, ending December 31st, 2013, I am searching for insurance, as I have yet to find employment. I've tried over 20 times to get on the Affordable Health Care website, over 20 times, with no luck. I've been able to set up a login and username, and have entered some information which is never saved when I have to log out due to a please wait message that never goes away. I'm working with an insurance agent to secure quotes outside of the government website, as I am sure we are way too middle class to be afforded any type of subsidy. Although I'm unable to determine this through the defective website, our cheapest quote is $1,580 per month. Again, that compares to $783 per month. Again, basically a 100% increase with a $12,500 deductible. The previous deductible was $7,500. Therefore, the Affordable Care Act will cost my family over $9,500 more per year in premiums, and our total deductibles to meet will increase to $37,500 from $22,500 for the family. The total effect is $24,500 additionally in 2014. Are we seriously supposed to be able to absorb this into our budget? What does our family do in this situation? We simply cannot afford $1,580 per month for insurance or $24,500 per year. What are our options? My husband will undergo chemotherapy and has a surgery scheduled for 2014. I am feverishly, did you hear that word? Feverishly looking for employment with health insurance coverage. I'm sure we are not the only family adversely affected by the law. Please provide answers for all of us. I look forward to hearing from you. Again, my plea is please provide true protection. Please provide security. Please accept the responsibility of what this law, what your support for this law did and is doing to millions of Wisconsinites, to millions of Americans. It is simply immoral what this law is doing to people, to their lives. It's not going to be pretty what this law is going to do to our health care system. It will lower quality. It will produce rationing, because the only way the government can afford to provide all this access is actually by limiting access. And of course, we're already seeing a very limited number of doctors that are actually accepting these contracts from the networks. They're providing the exchange, primarily because of all the mandated coverages that are dramatically increasing the price of health care, as we've demonstrated, or as I've demonstrated this evening, in these emails and these letters that we are receiving from real people, from people that are suffering because of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, I rise to speak on the topic of the nomination of Cornelia Pillard to the D.C. Circuit. But before I do that specific topic, I want to address a broader topic, which is how we got in these circumstances in the first place, and why we're here tonight, why we're having this discussion, and how this nuclear option, as it's been described, has come about. Now, most immediately, it was November 21st, 2013, just a few weeks ago, that the majority party here in the Senate unilaterally decided to break the rules of the Senate, violate the rules, and rewrite the rules themselves, despite the fact that the rules clearly say it takes a two-thirds majority of the Senate to do that. They just decided to disregard that they would just change the rules themselves. So they did that on November 21st, 2013, and what they specifically did, the specific rule change that they imposed unilaterally on the Senate, was to completely eliminate the opportunity for the minority party to have any ability to be a check or a balance on the process of selecting and confirming the nominees of a given president to the judiciary of the United States of America, the federal judiciary, or to the executive branch. It's a little bit sweeping, but that's exactly what's been done. This is contrary to the entire history of the Republic, where this has never been done before, and it applies to lifetime appointees. Judges, of course, federal judges, as we all know, once they're confirmed, they hold that office until they decide that they're done, at whatever age that might be. It is a lifetime appointment, and unless they commit an impeachable offense, there's nothing anybody can do about it. Well, one of the things that's interesting about this decision by our Democratic colleagues was that they decided to eliminate the rights that the minority party has had in the United States Senate for centuries. They decided to do that despite the fact that 20 of them warned vehemently against engaging in this very activity just a few years ago. As a matter of fact, none other than the Senate Majority Leader, who personally led this effort, Senator Reid, said in 2009, and I quote, "The right to extend the debate is never more important than when one party controls the Congress and the White House. In these cases, a filibuster serves as a check on power and preserves our limited government," end quote. The senior senator from New York, also in 2009, said, and I quote, "The checks and balances which have been at the core of this republic will be evaporated by the nuclear option." The checks and balances say that if you get 51% of the vote, you don't get your way 100% of the time. That's what our friends, the leadership of the majority party, the Democratic Party, that's what they said very, very recently. So you have to ask yourself, why would they do a complete reversal? Why would they do a 180-degree switch? Why would they go from a position of absolute vehement opposition to the nuclear option that denies the minority party any say whatsoever in the confirmation of federal nominees? Why would they go from that to where they were just a couple of weeks ago when they executed their plan and unilaterally broke the rules so that they could change the rules to inflict that very policy on the current minority party, the Republican Party? Well, we can look at what the majority leader said at the time. And one of the things that he said, and I will quote, this was from November 21st of this year, the day on which the majority leader made this change. He said, "There has been unbelievable, unprecedented obstruction. For the first time in the history of our republic, Republicans have routinely used the filibuster to prevent President Obama from appointing his executive team or confirming judges," end quote. That's what Senator Reid has asserted as his justification for this unilateral, unprecedented deprivation of minority party rights. In fact, just this evening, Senator Reid was back on the Senate floor, and he used the word obstructionism about a dozen times. So, Mr. President, I think it's worth considering what's actually happened. What does the record show? Let's go back to March of 2011, because that's an interesting moment in this discussion about how and whether and when and under what circumstances to confirm nominees. In March of 2011, Republicans decided that, you know what, it probably would be a good idea if the President Obama at this time, obviously, would be able to get a very large number of nominees appointed and confirmed without even having to go through the Senate process. The legislation is called the Presidential Appointment Efficiency and Streamlining Act of 2011. And under this act, thousands of appointees from the executive branch were simply no longer subject to Senate confirmation. So what Republicans did in March of 2011, far from obstructing anything, What we actually did was to say, Mr. President, here's a huge category of federal nominees, and we won't even require a vote. Won't even require Senate consideration. You get these, all of them. You nominate them, they're done. Period. Does that sound like obstruction? Not to me. It was passed by a Republican-controlled House, supported by Republicans in the Senate, signed into law. And so today, the law of the land, as a result of Republican cooperation on this, is that this president enjoys a luxury that no previous president has had. This huge category of nominees that are solely exclusively at his discretion. It doesn't matter if a single senator or every senator strongly objects, doesn't matter. Totally irrelevant. So I think we ought to consider that legislation in the context of this discussion. But let's take a look at those nominees who remain subject and have been subject prior to this legislation to Senate confirmation. So one category is federal judges. Now, in the district court, thus far, among district courts in the country, right, we have many district courts around the country. So far, the president has nominated 174 candidates to federal district courts around the country. Of the 174 that the president has nominated, I wonder if you could guess how many have been confirmed. Well, I'll tell you how many have been confirmed. 174. 174 confirmed, 0 rejected. Now, at the circuit court level, prior to the recent episode, the president had nominated 41 candidates to the circuit court. Of the 41, 39 had been confirmed. So the total, Mr. President, of judicial nominees that President Obama has sent to us in the Senate, it's a total of 217. 215 have been confirmed, and 2 have been objected to. So by my math, that's something like 1%. Objected to, 99% confirmed. This doesn't strike me as unreasonable obstruction. But judges aren't the whole story. There's also the non-judicial nominees, and we ought to consider those as well. So far, at least as of when we compiled this data, the President had nominated 1,488 individuals to various federal spots throughout the executive branch, the agencies, his departments, and so on. Of the 1,488, 1,486 have been confirmed, and 2 have been blocked by Republicans. That would include 100% of the President's cabinet nominees and 100% of virtually every other category, but not every last one. The total, if you add these together, 1,707 of the President's nominees, both judicial and non-judicial, 1,707 confirmed, 4 rejected. So that works out to something like the Senate has confirmed, with Republican support, because it can't happen prior to the rule change, couldn't happen without Republican support, Senate has confirmed 99.9% of President Obama's nominees to judgeships and to non-judgeships. Now you've got to ask yourself, could that possibly constitute outrageous obstruction, unprecedented obstruction, as Senator Reid has said, preventing President Obama from appointing his executive team or confirming judges? How can this possibly be? I know the majority leader came down to the Senate floor on the date on which he decided to unilaterally change the rules by breaking the rules. And he cited as an example the outrageous case of Chuck Hagel, who had served in this body. Chuck Hagel. Whatever became Chuck Hagel? Oh, that's right. He was confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, as has virtually every single other nominee the President has proposed. The leader seemed to think that it was completely unreasonable that Republican senators would demand some information from Senator Hagel along the way, former Senator Hagel at the time. Seems to me the fact that he's a former senator should not change his obligation to provide the information that the Senate requests. And when he provided that information, he was confirmed easily. So it seems pretty clear to me, seems pretty indisputable that this is really never was about obstructionism. 99.9% confirmation rate, it just can't be about obstruction. It's clearly not. So we've got to ask ourselves, if it's not the case that Republicans have been obstructing the President's team, and it's clearly not, then why did the majority in this body decide to unilaterally change the rules and deny the minority of the opportunity to have any say whatsoever on the confirmation process? Well, fortunately, some of our colleagues on the other side they've explained this to us. They've told us why they made this change. But let me put it in a little bit of context. You see, we're in a situation here where we have divided government. It's true, the American people elected President Obama to a second term, and elections have consequences. But on the very same day, the American people re-elected Republicans to be the majority party in the United States House. And all elections have consequences, not just presidential elections. So the reality is that the very liberal agenda that President Obama would like to pursue is very difficult. He can't get most of the liberal things that he wants to do, whether it's some kind of cap and trade or card check or his war on coal. This is well outside of the mainstream of where the American public is, and it's not where the consensus is in the House of Representatives. So his legislative agenda isn't going anywhere in the House. The administration understands that very well. The President understands that very well. And so do the members of the majority party here in the Senate. So what do you do if you have an agenda that's out of step with the American people and can't pass in a duly elected House of Representatives? Well, some people think that the thing to do is do an end run around the legislative body. Bypass the legislation and use an undemocratic, I would argue unconstitutional process, and have unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats impose by fiat and through regulation that which you cannot achieve through legislation. Now, of course, that is completely inconsistent with our Constitution, with the way our federal government is intended to operate, with the principle of the separation of powers. It would require pursuing an agenda that is out of step with the American people and without the consent of Congress, which, of course, is supposed to be a partner with any executive branch, with any president, in pursuing any agenda. Of course, our founders foresaw the danger of an executive that would try this sort of thing and would do an end run around the legislature and try to use the enormous power at the disposal of the executive, who has massive staff and huge agencies and all kinds of resources, and understood that it's quite possible that you could have an executive that would try, for instance, selective enforcement of laws, maybe unilateral suspension of laws, as we've seen this administration do, writing rules and regulations that are inconsistent with the law. This is all These are all behaviors that we could anticipate. And our founders did. They did. They anticipated that this could happen. And so what they did was they built a system that would have some checks and balances, that would provide some limitations. Among the other ways they did, there were many ways this was done, but one of them was a separation of powers, and specifically the creation of an independent judiciary, which would kind of be a referee on whether or not, for instance, a given agency, a given regulator was in fact complying with the laws, or whether they'd gone rogue, whether they'd gone overboard, whether they were overreaching, whether they were pursuing some agenda for which they didn't have authority. And these courts play an absolutely vital, and I would say completely indispensable role in giving individual Americans their last hope in seeking to preserve their liberty against an unfair, arbitrary, and even unconstitutional executive overreach. That's what the courts do. Now, as it happens, there's one particular court that plays a disproportionate role in this process of adjudicating and officiating over federal regulations. It just so happens that by virtue of its location, a big majority of cases in which an American citizen challenges a regulation because that citizen believes that this is a regulation that is unfair, unconstitutional, illegal, or otherwise not consistent with our laws, the venue where this ends up finally getting adjudicated is very often the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So this has become a bit of a problem for the administration and some of our friends in the Senate, because the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has become a bit of an obstacle to some of the ambitions that they would like to impose. One example, for instance, is last year, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals struck down for the second time in 4 years the EPA's regulations on cross-state air pollution. So this is a complicated story. We don't have to get into all the details, but bottom line is these are regulations that would, among other things, have a devastating impact on states like Pennsylvania that have a big coal industry and that have a big utility industry that uses coal to fire generators. The court found that the EPA had gone beyond its legal authority. The statute clearly says what the EPA may do and may not do. They were going beyond what they're permitted to do, and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals said so. That's not the only case in which the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled in ways that are problematic to some of our friends here. Another was a decision they made regarding recess appointments. You may remember this. A while back, the President made a very extraordinary decision. The President decided for the first time in the history of the Republic that it was up to him to determine when the Senate was in recess and when it was not. That was his unilateral decision to make. No other president ever took it upon himself to decide that it was his power to determine when a different branch of government was in recess or not, but this president did. He said that's his decision. So I guess by his logic, he could decide when we're out on lunch, that's a recess. Over a weekend, that's a recess. We don't know. It's up to him by his standard. And so he created an opportunity for himself to make appointments that he knew wouldn't be confirmed in the Senate or were unlikely to be confirmed. There's bipartisan, in some cases, concerns about some of these folks. Well, he went ahead and made the appointments. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals said, actually, no, the Constitution's pretty clear. You don't have that authority. Now, these just are a couple of examples where a nonpartisan, completely competent and a very highly respected appellate court made decisions about executive behavior. This has not sit so well with some of our colleagues. And so why do I bring this all up? Because this is what this is really all about, Mr. President. This isn't about Republican obstructionism. What this is about is our Democratic friends want to pursue a very liberal agenda. They can't do it through legislation, so they intend to do it through regulation. As they overreach and go beyond the legal authority, which they have already done and intend to continue to do, the victims, the American citizens who are victim of this overreach, are going to challenge these rules and regulations in court. And when they do, they're going to end up in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And some of our friends want to do whatever it takes to make sure they can win those decisions. That's not just my words. The senior senator from New York complained about the D.C. Circuit. He was on record claiming the D.C. Circuit overturned the EPA's ability to regulate existing coal plants. Okay. He further went on to hold that the SEC can't pass rulings unless they do what's called a cost-benefit analysis. That was another complaint that the senior senator from New York made about the D.C. Circuit. And so he told a group of supporters that in order to reverse this, Democrats will, and I quote, will fill up the D.C. Circuit one way or another. Mr. President, I think this is about as clear as it could be. There's people that don't like the decisions coming out of the court, and so their intention is to pack the court with people who share their political views and will therefore sustain decisions about the advancement of their liberal agenda. But it wasn't only the senior senator from New York who's made these comments. The majority leader himself explained this as well. Referring to the D.C. Circuit Court, he said, and I quote, "They're the ones that said the president can't have recess appointments. They've done a lot of bad things, so we're focusing very intently on the D.C. Circuit. We need at least one more. There's 3 vacancies. We need at least one more, and that will switch the majority." End quote. Could there be a more direct, straightforward statement about what their real intent is? Their intent is to pack a court with partisan people who will give them the decisions they need so that they can advance the agenda they want when it's blocked through the ordinary legal and constitutional legislative process. That's what's going on here. That's why we're here tonight. That's what's taking place. So when Republicans decided that we really don't think it's a good idea to manipulate courts this way, to populate them with partisans, to try